I think probably the entire world knows Google. And then you went to Amazon. How did that happen?
So I grew up in Lebanon. I lived in Lebanon my first 21 years, and then I moved to Dubai 26 years ago.
Can't you take us back to the first time you found yourself in a leadership role? How did that happen?
I moved from managing like a $60 million portfolio in advertising to $100,000 billing a year. While doing it, I was kind of scared. Having doubts is something that is constantly there. I think it's a imposter syndrome that everybody talks about.
Do you bring any of those learnings and capabilities to your role as a leader to convince others?
I think we confuse leadership with managerial skills. I think your ego then plays games with you, right? You start thinking that leadership is about how do you build.
Why do you think that leadership starts earlier than that?
Because it's about...
Hey, quick note. If you are listening to this podcast but not following it, hit the subscribe button. It really helps the show and helps me bring even more great leaders into the conversations. Thank you, and let's get back to the episode. Welcome to another episode of my podcast, Leading by Example. My guest today is the Managing Director for International Expansion at Amazon Ads in the EMEA region and Southeast Asia. He's responsible for growing markets in different areas and leading teams across different regions. Rayan, Karaky, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Was it a good introduction?
It was amazing. You did
Very.
You got the title right though, so that's a long one.
Yeah, it is. I was preparing a lot for the introduction.
Yeah, I still can't say it, but I feel like so it's you're good.
All right, very good. So thank you so much for being here. I know it's a very busy time for you. First of all, because of the leadership position you're in, but also because of the whole situation right now. We are living in the GCC region, but we'll get into that a little bit later on the show.
Sure.
First of all, I just want to ask you, the reason why you're here today is because at the end of each episode, I always ask my guests about if there's an inspirational leader here in Dubai that you would recommend for my next episode. And I'm going to ask you that as well. I hope you're ready for that. But my previous guest, Dr. Mohammed Al-Wadiya, mentioned you. So I'm curious about, what's the relation and why do you think he mentioned you?
Right. So I have a long history with Mohammed. We started working together in 2003, I want to say, at Leo Burnett. I was responsible for the media business and he was responsible for the advertising, the creative business, if you want. And we worked on common accounts. And then when he left, we just kept in touch and he took a direction, towards more real estate development, being part of the ecosystem here. I took more the digital marketing route. So every time we sit together, there's like so many exchanges of ideas and just he teaches me a lot of stuff. He says that I teach him a lot of stuff. I highly doubt. I'm sure he has a lot of mentors. But yeah, we've kept in touch and he's just a really, really close friend as well. So.
Yeah, amazing. So there must be a reason why he mentioned you, right? So you must also be teaching him a little bit the other way around.
Yeah, I think we always found we always come up with a lot of new ideas every time we sit together, but both of us have barely any time to execute. Yeah. So it's always inspirational. I'm thankful for him for mentioning me, but yeah.
All right. So let's get into just a little bit about your background. So who is Rayan? And maybe end off by saying a little bit about what is your overall current responsibility.
So I grew up in Lebanon. I lived in Lebanon my first 21 years. And then I moved to Dubai 26 years ago. I graduated in finance, nothing to do with advertising. Obviously, when you grow up in a country that's kind of war-torn and where, people struggle, you kind of get that diploma just to make sure you have a certificate that allows you to work and build your career. And I moved to Dubai and, found this job that I knew nothing about and just loved it so much, stayed in it for 26 years. I moved a lot of companies, obviously. But I guess the grind of growing up in that country had helped me a lot without me knowing, in retrospect, obviously. And today I'm responsible for the expansion of the advertising business across the emerging markets of Amazon. So I manage markets from, Nordics, Benelux, all the way to Southeast Asia. Very diverse markets, very different priorities. A lot to keep up with, but super fun.
Amazing. And so what does your team consist of today? How many people is in the organization you lead, sir?
I think in the direct organization I lead, there's about maybe 95 people. And in the cross functions that serve my organization, there's about 130. Okay. And that's also another thing, right? Like your dependency across functions is really high.
Yeah.
So you gotta be able to manage by influence, not just by direct management. So
Yes.
that's
And we're going to get into that as well because so this podcast is about my guest's leadership journey, right? Because I speak with top executives who have made it to a certain point in their careers, and my main audience is young leaders who also want to build a career and reach the top in their careers as well. So I want to take you back to your beginning of your leadership journey and all the way to where you are today, because I'm sure there's a lot of lessons that can be learned for my audience and maybe also some advice that you can give along the way. So can't you take us back to the first time you found yourself in a leadership role? How did that happen?
So I mean, I'll tell you an example from childhood, and then I'll tell you an example from career.
Yes.
In the early days of I was a Boy Scout at some point in my childhood, and I always saw this person who carries the kind of there's a like a pole with a wooden lion head,
Mhm.
who leads the that specific tribe, if you want. And I always wanted to carry that. It was always like, no, I want to be there. I don't want to lead from the front. And I got there eventually because I was just so motivated to do it. So all you have to do is just complete a certain series of tasks. I wish it was that simple in the real world. Then years later, I think when I started my career in media, the world was starting to change, because we're not digital natives, right? So as you saw, the advertising industry from 2001 when I first joined till today has been through a lot of changes. So I think in 2005, 6, when I was like 5 years or 6 years into my career, I chose to go the digital route just because I felt it's more exciting and because I was always attracted to computers and things that are technical, which had nothing to do with broadcasting. But when the industry is new, you kind of have to lead because you have to try, and you have to have everybody see what you're seeing in this. So you kind of have to translate what you see the future looking like to get everybody aligned behind you in that mission, right? So, and you do this without planning it. It's not like I was sitting there thinking, oh yeah, what do I need people to believe? I was there thinking, oh, this is going to be a big thing. How do I make sure everyone sees it? Even though I had no management role. I was an individual contributor at Publicis, and I had to find a way to convince my peers, my leaders, and even juniors on the team that this is where the world is heading. So there was a bit of intuition, but also there's a bit of seeing the reality around you that things are shifting in that direction.
But so you took that responsibility without having the formal role of leadership at that time.
That's right. So I was managing a large portfolio of accounts on pure media. So I was managing TV budgets and print budgets. And I remember the first time I made the full shift to digital, I moved from managing like a $60 million portfolio in advertising to $100,000 billing a year. And, taking that, massive change in role and reduction in role was probably, an amazing moment in my career. But while doing it, I was kind of scared. So
it was tough when you were in the moment.
Yeah, because you were like, I'm going to leave the portfolio of these large accounts and I'm going to go after this digital thing that, most of my leaders think it's a fad. So I was actually told that at some point.
They didn't believe in it.
I'll tell you like a funny story. What made me shift is my first campaign I ever ran on digital was a campaign for a hotel chain. And it was pure banners, right? There was nothing else at the time. I'm talking 2004 maybe. And we were supposed to optimize that campaign. So what we did is we just took the same banner that was running in the US and we just wrote on it للسعودية فقط, which means for Saudi only. And we saw results just skyrocket as opposed to just running the English creative. And I'm like, that's something.
Yeah.
That's got to mean something, because you can't optimize print and TV. Like you could do it, but how far can you go?
Yeah.
So it felt like, okay, no, this is really interesting, and you could just let your creativity go. So yeah, that's why I was like, okay, I'm gonna go after this.
Yeah, so that's interesting. The first part you said was that already as a child you started to take on this leadership role. So did you already know from childhood that you want to become a leader growing up, or when did that realization start?
No, so when I actually got that, the head of the line thing, I noticed how much work there is, and I was so lazy as a child.
Yeah.
So I was like, no, I'm never gonna do this.
Well, they do say give the work to a lazy person, right?
Yeah, because they found the shortcut,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, at the time I was like, no. And I've always wanted to be like a football player as a child. So I was like, no. And I don't want to be captain. I just want to,
Yeah.
play my role. But also there are things that happen with you in life, in your personal life, that change your circumstances and that make you face a different reality. And you decide to, okay, you know what? No, I'm gonna take charge now.
So when did you formally take on a position where you were leading other people?
I think in 2008. So I went to the US for a stint to just learn everything about digital, because obviously it was so advanced on that side of the world. And I remember, maybe without naming the brands, but I was managing one of the automotive players. I was managing the global search program on Google. And that was like a new thing, big thing, 2007. Learned everything about digital and came back to Publicis to kind of create that digital team.
Yeah, because I saw you were working for a company for 7 years, and then you went to another company, and then you came back in a more senior role, right?
So these are all companies within Publicis Group.
Yeah, okay, yeah, because I could see some familiar names when I was looking through your CV on LinkedIn. And this company was also mentioned here and so on.
Yeah, I spent 12 years in Publicis Group.
Okay.
In all, I would say half of them were in leadership role.
Okay. Quick break from the conversation. This episode is sponsored by Blue Energy Partners. The leadership team is doing something amazing, and the company is growing fast. I really like their focus on leadership and leadership development, which is why I'm happy to have them as a sponsor for a podcast about leadership. So if you are in the marine fuel industry, this is a company to pay attention to. Thank you for sponsoring this podcast, and let's get back to the conversation.
But creating that team was also like a rocket ship, because that team was growing proportionately to how the revenue was growing, and clients were flooding into digital and digitization. So we moved from one person to like a 90-person team in like 5 years maybe, which was super interesting.
So when you look back at your first leadership role, do you remember standing there and, take us back to the actual day where you suddenly the next day you're going into a job and now you have people reporting to you? Did you feel any doubts or any fear of taking over other people's, not taking over their lives, but having the responsibility for their work environment and so on?
Yeah. I mean, having doubts is something that is constantly there.
Still?
Yeah, I don't think it goes away. I think it's the imposter syndrome that everybody talks about.
Yeah.
I think it's really real. And I think it comes from always expecting more from yourself. And I think that's that, if not controlled, that can be very dangerous for a leader.
So how did you overcome that in your first leadership role?
I didn't overcome it. I just realized that it's actually fueling a lot of my curiosity. So I was moving from, I don't know enough about this, to who am I going to hire? Who knows about this? Who's going to teach me? And I think that was probably the first decision I ever made, was who I have to hire for that digitization role. And I hired 2 folks who were, digital natives, super bullish. And they came in and it just like, they were the wind in my sail. Like they just, they drove me to a bigger leadership role.
So your first actual leadership role, was that when you hired these 2? Or
exactly.
Okay.
I think that was officially when I became an official manager leader.
Yeah.
Because I believe leadership started way earlier than that. But becoming responsible for people.
But take me back to that. Why do you think that leadership starts earlier than that?
Because it's about influencing a direction without necessarily having the full power. I think we confuse leadership with managerial skills.
Yeah.
Of course, you need managerial skills as a leader, but you have to have the courage to kind of take a direction, get everyone to see it, get everyone to rally behind it, and then execute on it and own the blame. Because as a leader, you don't own the success, you own the blame. The success should be owned by the team that you're leading. So every time you want to motivate someone, it was about how can they win and how can they shine. And that rallied them behind whatever vision you had.
It reminds me of, I had the CEO of Microsoft from Denmark and Iceland on my podcast. And she said, you can't have, and there was a mentor who said that to her, you can't have both the glory and the power, or the power and the glory, right? You have to choose.
That's right.
And this reminds me of what you say. You have to take the blame, but not the success.
That's right. Because also, like, people have to feel that you have their back and you protect them, right?
Mm.
And I think also you have to decide which of the, so we have a principle at Amazon, and I think it existed long ago, which is the two-way door decision and the one-way door decision, which is the two-way door decision is something you can reverse. The one-way door decision is something that you cannot. So choosing, for example, the direction to go, okay, you know what, let's dabble with digital. That's something you could just shut down because it's an experiment. But then going, you know what, I'm going to quit everything and this is what I'm going to do. That's something that you're the only one who's going to bear the responsibility of failure. So you have to have just the right amount of indication and the right intuition to feel that it can be a success, but not without any experimentation. You have to experiment first.
So going into this first leadership role, were there any mistakes you did at that time that you can remember that had an impact on the rest of your leadership journey?
Yes, I think at some point early in your career, when you take on leadership positions, especially if there's also circumstances. So let me give you an example. At the time, there was a big managerial exodus from Publicis. So I found myself in a leadership position almost de facto a little bit. And I think your ego then plays games with you, right? You start thinking that leadership is about how do you build monster teams and how do you grow your influence by number of people or number of decisions that you make. Power is another one that, and you lose sight of your own knowledge. So you find yourself every time you take on a challenge, is that actually, if you really want to be true to the people that you're managing, you're going to have to go back a little bit, relearn, and then lead again. And that was very pronounced when I moved from Publicis to Google, because I moved from a manager I was chief digital officer, so I had like these 90 people, and I moved to being an individual contributor.
To Google?
To Google.
So when you went from what's the name?
From Publicis
to Google, you were leading 95 people in a chief C-level role, and then you went into an individual contributor.
An agency manager as in not manager. I was an individual contributor role.
Okay, but let's get back to that in a second. Right. But when you grew from 2 people to 95 people, what do you think was the biggest difference in when you're leading individual contributors to suddenly be leading leaders?
I think the rallying behind that I was talking about, which is like getting everyone to see your vision, communication becomes super, super high on the agenda, because it's not a small circle of people that you're managing. It's not like 5-6 people. You just put them in a room. And so you have to find a way to create a mechanism on how you trickle vision down into an actual mission and actual executable steps. So you have to almost simplify where the direction is heading, to the extent where a junior who joins tomorrow, if he reads that, he should be able to understand it. And I think the bond and trust that you have to build with your immediate reportees, who are now managers, is also something that you have to work hard on, because they have to become a reflection of what you see, but they also have to criticize what you see, to correct you every time you deviate from what the mission is. So for me, it became more important to hire leaders who are better than me at least one thing, because they became they drive now. Your role is to just unlock. Every time there's a blocker, you just unblock it. You open doors. But you stop being responsible for the vision and mission at some point, and you have to hand the rein over. I think that transition is probably the hardest.
Yeah, because that can both hit your ego, but also your sense of value. Because suddenly, if I give this away and give that away, so who am I at the end? What is my role?
That's right.
So how did you deal with that?
I didn't. I struggled with it for a long, long time. And the imposter syndrome is actually, like, I can't tell you the amount of times where I sat with one of my team and I was like, hey, teach me about this. I'm doing the same thing today, right? Like if we talk about simplification through AI as an example, I have no idea what simplification through AI really looks like, unless I go to juniors and go, okay, what is complicated about your job? I'll go solve it, using AI, and come back and let's see if we can scale this. My role is to help him scale his success. But that saves any company tons of time and focuses on the right thing, and people become more motivated because they're doing less of the let's call it junk work.
Mm.
So it's always about taking lessons from your most juniors on the team and seeing what of them can scale and seeing if they're true to the vision and mission. I think that's the probably combo. But for me to overcome it, it took for me to go and say, you know what, there's no way I can learn all of this. And accept that.
Yeah.
And know that if I know 20%, it's enough. The rest would be corrected by the team.
Yeah. And that's I think that's a very valuable lesson also for leaders who are reaching higher levels now, because you have the young leaders who are they have to be very knowledgeable about the area that they're leading, but the more senior you become, you cannot know everything about all the departments that you're leading. So you need to have these experts and leaders who are strong in their field that you can then learn from.
That's true. I wish I knew that when I first started leading.
Yes.
Because it would have saved me so much agony more than effort. At the beginning, I was trying, and middle management is probably the hardest part of leadership, because there's just so many people to influence and satisfy, and while at the same time remaining technical.
Yeah.
That's where the balance that you have to strike. And it's simply like, to avoid burnout, you probably, like, my biggest advice today to middle manager goes, set your priority. What has the highest impact with the highest visibility? Do that first. Right? Then start, going down the list of priorities and really decide if this is something that you should be doing. Or is this something that you should be learning to be able to do? Like, that's huge compared to the time that you actually have.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wish I knew that.
I hope that's a valuable lesson for those that are listening, because I think this is a common struggle with people, growing in their leadership roles. So now you moved up the ladder in the company and you became C-level at some point, right? So how did that happen? How did you reach that level of becoming a C-level in this organization?
I think it was a combination of finding a lane that is super unique, which is digital, but also a lot of luck.
About being in the right place at the right time, in the right time specifically.
Yeah, but you create your luck a little bit, because there is luck for sure, but also you have to create your luck by deciding that, you know what, there's a risk I'm going to take. Because also some of my peers went on to become the CEOs of the agencies, right? But didn't go the digital route. Yeah. But I think in retrospect, the one thing that I wanted to tame is the curiosity. And I feel if I just continued the path that I had before, I would have killed that curiosity a lot earlier. And I think learning by doing, at least on the digital side, was so important for my career today, that I wouldn't have been able to see it back then, or had I stayed in the same lane.
Yeah.
So I think, intuition, luck, throwing myself in a space that I believe in fully.
So take me back to the practical part of it, right? So I have listeners who might be taking their next step to C-level soon. How did that specifically happen for you? Was it like someone came to you and say, hey, Rayan, we think you are the perfect fit for this role, or did you have to fight for it, or how did it happen?
It was exactly the story from the Boy Scout.
Yeah.
It was like, I want a C-level role. And because and that's the ego part.
But did you say it out loud? Or?
No, I said it out loud.
You said it out loud?
Yeah. I said, you know what, like, either hand me the reign of a full P&L, or if you want me to go the technical route, I want to be chief digital officer. And titles are free. And I think that's probably where today, in the current environment and the way the job market is going, you almost have no choice but to broaden your level of knowledge rather than look for a fast vertical ascent on the corporate ladder. I think that's where I started identifying gaps, right? It's because I went after, okay, how can I optimize to be the highest? And when you optimize to be the highest, do you do it at the expense of knowledge? And I only realized that a lot later. So when I started having these conversations I was telling you about with more junior folks, like, skip phases, and I shouldn't have done that. But it's easier said now.
Retrospect.
I can say that.
Yeah, but that's why people can learn from this conversation. They can maybe skip some of the mistakes that you did, but also sometimes it's actually good to do these mistakes because that also builds character.
That's true. But I think like if I had asked myself a question when I was asking for the chief digital officer role, which was, what am I going to do after that? I would have quickly realized that there's other knowledge gaps that I have to fill. So today when somebody asks me like, should I go for this job or not? The answer is not in that job. The answer is, if you take that job, what would you do next? So it's
You have
almost
to look ahead.
every new role has to be a stepping stone for something else, unless you're looking to retire, right? So okay, is this role? Then you start saying, instead of what's the title of the role, you go, what is this role going to teach me? How is it going to complement my existing skill set so that I can get the role after that I really, really want? And I think we used to say, like when I was growing up and in my career, we used to say, okay, identify your end goal. First of all, that's impossible.
Especially with the changing world.
There's no chance. If you identify your end goal 20 years ago, we're in a different world. So I think it's just about identifying the medium-term goal. What is it that you really, really like to do and want to do? And what's missing from your profile? Would you hire you for that role today? And if you don't, then look for a job that complements that skill set.
Yeah.
I think that's the best way for.
Yeah, that's a very good advice. And so do you think you would have reached that level in that organization if you didn't push for it yourself?
Eventually, yes, because I was also managing a unique part of the business. But we were imagining those roles, right? Because there was no chief digital officer at the time. It was like, okay, let's create that role. Let's create that title.
But couldn't it also have been one of the others in your team or one of your peers who could have taken that role?
I think it could have been, but the earlier risk that I took by ditching my entire portfolio and focusing on digital gave me an edge. There's a first mover advantage in that. And that applies today. Like we hear a lot about people using AI to build tools or to build knowledge or to build. It's not necessarily about that, because that you can learn. It's about how you're going to deploy that to future-proof your company, or to grow your revenue, or to even build your own knowledge. Like I spent the time during the war now, because we were working from home, besides doing my day job, is building dashboards for myself to understand my life better. Health dashboards, financial dashboards, career dashboard, just to go, okay, where am I heading? And what do I do next? So
very interesting. All right. So, and the next part here, I think, is a very big lesson. Going from chief digital officer, leading 95 people, to what many people would consider a downgrade in your career. Right? Suddenly you're leading this many people, and then you're just individual contributor. How did that happen, and why did you do that?
So I would love to claim that I just I wanted to reset and learn and do all of that. That's not the truth. The truth is that Google came knocking, and it was a very tough interview process, and I was always motivated by challenge, and the challenge then was to get the job. And I remember one of my mentors at the time, he's like, "You're never going to take this job." And I think he was saying it from a place of challenging me, because I was too comfortable, too king of my castle, working for the agency. Everything was great. And that kind of, triggered me a little bit, because and he was explaining, why my ego is being a big part of decision making. And I felt that, okay, you know what? No, it's not my ego. Although my ego is telling me it's not my ego. And also, I got to be honest that the potential of the people that I was going to work with was super exciting. It was people from completely different background, a lot of management consultants, a lot of people with financial backgrounds. So the appeal of who am I going to rub shoulders with was big. I think the last one was also when you're in a room of managers or leaders, and you feel like your contribution is not fully understood, or you feel like no one can add value to what you do, then you gotta get out.
So it was a combination of you wanted to maybe leave something, but also try something new and meet new people and work with in a new environment.
Yeah, I wanted to sit in a room where I feel like an imposter.
Mhm.
You know, I wanted
You were getting too comfortable in the other.
yeah, I wanted to sit in a room where people are going to teach me a lot of stuff just by contributing to my business. Mind you, I'm probably the one who kept them at an arm's length from my business throughout all that time. But yeah, it was, and the first 6 months were a struggle.
In Google.
Yeah, it's not struggle from a performance standpoint because the job wasn't too difficult, but it was a struggle for my ego to walk in and have to, I don't know, build a contract on the tool in such a manual way where I had to do data entry. Like it was a reset, a true reset.
Yeah.
But it was a reset that just put a lot of fuel in my engine and just changed the face of my career completely.
Yeah. And is that something you would recommend to others? Because quite often, maybe not at C level like you were, but middle managers or senior managers, they sometimes have this opportunity to go maybe sideways or even step down a little bit because there's a better opportunity going forward. Do you recommend that, or do you just say, no, continue and adding more people to your team and have bigger leadership roles and so on?
Yeah, look, I don't know if there's a standard formula for everyone, but maybe the question is, am I still learning? Am I learning at the speed I should be learning at my career stage? But also, are there other ways? Because it's not just about moving jobs. You might want to, I don't know, start off something. You might want to be part of something that's being created. You might want to sit on an advisory board. You might want to invest in some startups or work on your own investment portfolios, right? Like there's always something that you can do to keep your mind fresh, and you keep learning.
Yeah.
So it's not always that, but I say if the choice is between, if you want career goals and you want leadership and this is something that appeals to you, then you have to ask yourself, am I on the right path? Is my skill set, am I adding weaponry to my skill set, or am I just going to be stagnant and just growing vertically because it happens that I'm here?
Yeah.
So it's very personal.
So it's back again to what you said before, is this job adding to what I want to do next? Right. And
Yeah.
if they're stuck in where they are right now, then maybe it's not the right place. And it could be that they have to move to something where they're not leading, but they're learning new skills.
If they want leadership.
Yeah.
Because I don't think leadership is meant for everyone. I don't think everyone wants it.
Yeah. And that's very interesting. Do you think that now that you are more senior in your career and have achieved a lot career-wise, do you think you can see in someone young that this person has top executive potential? Can you see that early on, or is it more later on you can?
I can see leadership traits, and I can see, I can even see leadership traits that I didn't have, because obviously I didn't have those, so I can spot them. But yes, that's something you can spot.
So what are you looking for now? We jump a little bit out of your career journey, but now that you're looking at someone that you want to hire or promote, what do you look for in those leaders? You think those are going to be the future leaders of this organization?
Yeah, I look for people who are curious, because that's. I look for people who are. It's almost like there's a bit of a humility to their knowledge, but also they're able to dial up and dial down parts of their character. Because so we used to do this, leadership colors, which is basically your profile as a person, as an employee. And as a leader, sometimes you have to dial up the red, which is, and sometimes you have to dial up the yellow, which is the more inspirational leader. But you cannot forget the blue, because you want the data. And at the same time, you have to motivate people, so you're green. Having that diversity and being able to dial it up and down, even if you're not today in a manager position, is something that you can spot. You could just spot trends.
Yeah.
How do they manage conflict? How do they manage upwards versus their peers? If you put them responsible for a team, even if it's not official, how do they behave?
So you can also test them a little bit to see how do they do in not a fictional scenario, but a thought scenario.
Test them not just as they succeed or fail. Test them to be able to advise them and guide them. But they have to want it, because a lot of people have those traits, but they don't want to lead.
So you say leadership is not for everyone. I think this is a common thing. We see that sometimes in a team, the highest performer, the best performer, gets promoted to leadership, even though this person is maybe not suitable to become a leader. Is this something you see, and how do you avoid that happening?
Yeah, that's a massive mistake, because some of the top performers are meant to be lone wolves, and they like being lone wolves. And actually, you're doing them a disservice. Like, I've seen so many people, even in the current job that I'm in and at Google as well, where when we moved them from a managerial role to an individual contributor role, their careers flourished. Because they were doing much more interesting stuff, and because they were the kind of person who likes to unlock things themselves. They like to go in the weed of things and figure them out and problem solve, and that's also a trait that leaders sometimes don't have. If you ask me to dig and dig and dig and dig, I can only go so far. Even when I was early in my career, it was hard for me to dig. So I had to find someone who would dig for me, and give me that insight, and then I'll make the decision. So you got to be able to spot these trends. Otherwise, you're managing everyone with the same lens, which is, you're good at your job, therefore next you need to be a manager. And I think in today's world, that's going to become much more pronounced, because leadership roles or managerial roles are not going to be as frequent as it used to be. That's the reality of the
world. That's very interesting. All right, so you moved to Google without being a leader. When did you then become a leader within Google?
So I found I found my path. At the time, programmatic was just something that people talk about, which is basically just the automation of how you do media buying and selling. It was a space that I started to explore around 4 years before I left the agency, and I actually created the first trading desk for Publicis here in the region, which was basically where we operate on trading inventory. So that space I fully understood, and that was unique to my background, because at Google, it's not like you see a lot of agency background. You see a lot of more management consultants background. You see, different profiles. So I found that as a unique path, and I was lucky because there was a role that opened up, and I had the technical skill because I had operated a trading desk before, so I know what it was.
So that was luck, but you created your own luck, right? There was a luck because there was an opening, but you also created your own luck because you have actually studied this and worked with this.
Exactly. I created it 4 years earlier without knowing that I'm creating it. So it gave me an edge to get that role. And that role was the first managerial role at Google. And that was 9 months after I joined Google. So I almost didn't serve Google in what they hired me for. But I served them in other ways, obviously. And that was also, like, I think a fraction of media buying was happening through programmatic channels. Today, everything is programmatic. So again, finding that unique thing that you think is going to be the future of how things are done in your own industry, whatever that industry is that unique path. So I was lucky again to catch another wave. I'm a wake surfer, so that works.
But your career also started when the digital age really started, and the IT and all of that in the beginning of the 2000s, right? And end of
I discovered the internet at 17. I wasn't, it was dial-up connection where you couldn't do anything really. But so I found another technically wave that I caught. And I did that for a while and that was actually a very unique role, because that was a role where you had to convince a lot of the internal stakeholders before you even sell to the market. And again, with people who are really, really sharp and smart, it was interesting.
And speaking of convincing people, and you have to be a strong communicator. And I'm very happy that I did a little bit of research about you before this session today. I noticed that you used to be, or maybe still are, a stand-up comedian.
Yeah, I used to do that.
You don't do it anymore?
No, I don't. I don't think my jokes would work now.
You still get into it, but I think you learn a lot from standing on stage, right, and speaking, and captivating the audience and so on. Do you bring any of those learnings and capabilities to your role as a leader to convince others?
Yeah, so that started from school days, because I was registered in school younger. And so I was born in December, and my parents registered me a lot earlier so I can go to school earlier. So most of my peers and friends in school were older than me. So I had to develop something as a defense mechanism. So I was like,
because physically you couldn't keep up.
Exactly, I couldn't keep up. So I was like, okay, let me develop a sense of humor. That, and then also I worked on it, right? Like, I joined improv classes here when I first started my career. I even pushed my team in the early days at Google to go through improv classes, because it teaches you how to be quick on your feet. And I don't think it's just about stand-up comedy. I think being on stage Although it's like the most feared thing in human beings, I think it was number one.
Yeah.
That was actually number two, which is puzzling. So yeah, being on stage is something that I actually enjoy, and I feel like it's a release. It's almost like you get this stage high where and you don't see the audience, you just see the story that you created and that you're gonna tell.
Yeah.
And I always found that super fascinating. Like I think if I wasn't in my career, I'd probably be maybe not a stand-up career. I'm not that funny, but a public
speaker. I've actually done that for a few years in Denmark before. I continued my career, but I was a public speaker for around 3 years.
There you go.
Yeah, that was my main income at that time, and I really enjoyed it as well. Standing on stage, there was also a little bit of ego to it, and I was also quite younger at that time, so I enjoyed getting all the attention. But suddenly, the rush you get when standing on stage, and now you have to deliver. That also taught me a lot later on in my career, right? When you have to. And when I started working for a big corporation in Denmark and, convincing my employees or my leaders, you have to build up how you are delivering a message to the audience, right?
Yeah. So I'll like a funny story. So I did this improv class, then I did stand-up comedy class, which is more about structure of the jokes and how do you tell a joke, right?
Yeah, you can be thought to be funny.
Yeah, exactly. You tell me not. So the first competition I participated in was called Beat the Gong, which is basically you're on stage and like 5 people in the audience have red cards. If 3 of them raise the red cards, you're off the stage, and you have to pass the 5 minutes in the first. I think I was gonged off after like 45 seconds.
Oh shit!
And I think that's when comedy, like it stopped being about ego and became okay. If I'm gonna do comedy, I'm gonna have to enjoy it myself, because if people are not liking it, I have to find a way to like it, right? Funny is that I won that competition like 4 or 5 times later, but like years later. But yeah, there's a feeling inside you when you're on stage that's undescribable to me.
Yes.
It's like the runner high for runners.
Yeah, definitely.
And there's a crash when you get off stage as well. I don't know if you ever that.
I did, and that was also why I stopped, because for 3 years I was basically going on stage telling the same story, and I was the big man, and everybody was clapping and standing ovation, and then I left. And then I didn't have any to share it with. I didn't have colleagues. I was just all by myself.
Yeah.
And that also actually made me think at the beginning of 2020 that, maybe I should find a job in a big corporation. So also, get colleagues, but also get to understand how, big organizations work, because I wanted to be a consultant afterwards. And I was actually quite lucky, because I actually got a job in big corporation the 1st of March 2020, after having been self-employed for some years. And I still had a few gigs in my calendar, speaking gigs, and then everything shut down. The 11th of March in Denmark, that's when everything closed down. Right. And the few opportunities I had in my calendar, they were all cancelled. So I was quite lucky that I got a job, and then I stayed in the job for 4 years leading a program. Yeah. But that was also quite interesting time. But you're right, you get this rush on stage, and then suddenly it plateaus afterwards. It's like, what's next?
Yeah.
So you need your fix.
No, look, and like if I give advice to people who are about to go on stage and do something big, I say the stage is probably one of the loneliest places that you can be in. So your challenge is, how do you bring the audience to the stage without being them? So how do you make them part of the story, no matter how serious the topic is?
Yeah.
How do you involve them? How do you break that ice barrier between you being up there and them being in their seats? Like I found that so key to how they receive your entire speech. I've done the same gigs sometimes with the same material.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it completely bombed. Sometimes it was, wow, it's the same material.
Yeah.
It's just about how do you start.
It's about the delivery, and also sometimes it's also about the audience. You can have the
for sure, of course. Yeah. But that's your job. Your job is to understand who you're talking to.
Yeah, definitely.
So.
All right, so let's go back again to your career. Yeah, that was. No, but there are some traits that you can use here, right? And that was the purpose of it, because then you have to convince others that this is the right direction to go. So you need those, storytelling skills that you learn on stage. But let's maybe move a little bit quickly through your Google career. You started off with leading nobody, and then you build a team. So you also
I inherited a team that's working on the programmatic aspect of Google.
Yeah.
I led that team and grew it for maybe 5 years. And then I took on a different role within the company that had my old team, but also we joined a few other teams,
Okay. So you,
market teams, and
so that's when you became maybe a leader for leaders at Google.
yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's yeah.
And throughout this journey, now before we jump to Amazon, what did you make any like big mistake, leadership mistake during those years? The first years in your career when you were becoming a leader.
A lot of mistakes. Yeah, I think, I mean, everything I talk about now in terms of concepts of things that you did in hindsight were all triggered by mistakes that I did. I think sometimes fixating on a vision and not knowing when to stop and when to go back is probably the most detrimental. And also, especially in the corporate world, if you're a driver and you're driving from the front and you just you want to bulldoze your way through everything to get to the vision, you burn so many bridges that later on you actually need.
Yeah.
And that has been maybe the single feedback that I've gotten maybe across 10, 12 years of my career is that, just because you believe in something, you have to bring everyone with you.
Yeah.
Even if they're not in your team.
But that's the red character. You also, I guess you have a little of the red, right? You want to move forward quickly and let's just move everybody and you need to get the team with you.
That's right. And the blind spot was, I'm doing it with my team anyway. So why am I not doing it with other functions? Yeah. Why am I not making everyone see it? I'm doing it with my leadership as well. Like for leadership to empower me to be read, they need to have understood where I'm trying to take it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a big lesson in everything: humility and over communicating, and also seeing what's good about other people rather than just dismissing them because they don't see the things the same way. I think that's probably the biggest learning I've had. Yeah. So the biggest mistakes I've made was just ignoring that completely and going, "What do you know?"
Yeah,
that's so easy to fall into that trap, especially if you're leadership on your own. Nobody sat and taught you. Like there was no structure to it. Yeah. There's not enough podcast at the time for me to listen.
Now there is.
Yeah, now there is. So I think that's a big one.
Amazing. And so, okay, so you left Google, you went to Amazon. So you came from a company that has a very strong reputation, strong brand. Everybody knows Google. Yeah. I think probably the entire world knows Google. And then you went to Amazon. How did that happen?
So it wasn't my first conversation with Amazon. I had that conversation before. And I think it's also recognizing what is my skill set I enjoy doing, right? Like I enjoyed building, clearly from everything that I talked about. It was always about taking something super, nascent and turning it into something big and advanced. And I think I'd gotten to a place at Google where I was still working with some super smart people, but my job became so much more predictable and so much more, the product is so mature. Everything is just there for you to just, rest and vest more. And I felt like I have still sprints in me. So I wanted to sprint. I just didn't know where to sprint. And I think also I wanted not to have always the MENAT hat. So I wanted to explore something beyond just the region.
But still staying in Dubai.
Still staying in Dubai. And I think also that's something that's super important is that everybody talks about leadership roles across the world that have to be either in London or in New York. I'm like, why? Like we have enough talent here and we have amazing people who are able to lead wider regions. So I want that leadership role from here because this is now home.
And this is also very central.
Yeah. And why are we, we shouldn't hide behind that. Like this is a city that leads and we should do the same. Yeah. And I had this opportunity at Amazon to do that. So I think it was that. And I think also going back to the principle is that I said to myself, what am I going to do after Amazon? And I felt that a lot of my career was very advertising heavy. Obviously with Google, I learned a lot more. But I felt also that there's the commerce aspect, the much more rigor that Amazon manages with. There's a lot more, data-driven decisions and a lot more scrutiny and mechanisms, and I felt that part is missing from what I know.
Yeah,
and I know how I know to do things.
So there's another opportunity for you to learn and grow.
Yeah, I was great into turning data into an amazing story, but I wasn't really great at let me scrutinize that data to the level where actually I can look at the inputs and make decisions based on them.
Mm.
So I felt like if I'm ever going to get into startups at some point, I need this.
Yeah.
Like this is what's missing from my profile.
Mm.
So it was just multiple factors. The fact that it's complementary to what I know, the fact that it was a nascent business. The advertising business at Amazon is still nascent. It's still new.
Mm.
I mean, Amazon advertising has been in some of the regions I'm managing 3 or 4 years.
So it's just tell me about what is the difference between Amazon and Amazon Ads?
So Amazon Ads, just like AWS, just like Amazon stores,
Mm.
they're all companies within Amazon.
And the reason I'm asking this is because I'm from Denmark, and I don't think Amazon is very big in Denmark. So from when I speak to people all over the world, everybody knows what Amazon is, and of course I know what Amazon is. On a, I know Jeff Bezos has built this company, but I've never used Amazon, to be honest. And my wife uses it a lot now since we moved to Dubai. But it started as a online book store and so on, right? So now you have the big Amazon, and then you have Amazon Ads. So for someone like me who is not digital, explain it to me so I can understand it.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, like within Amazon, there's multiple companies.
Mm.
Ads is one of the teams that exist, and Amazon Ads is basically everything from helping sellers and vendors that sit on the store talk to a wider audience and sell to a wider audience, all the way to advertising on Prime Video, advertising on Twitch. So we have multiple products that we offer to help customers really grow their business. And Amazon has this principle, which is customer obsession, which is, in my world, is centered around both the customer who's buying, but also our marketeers and partners who are kind of building plans to expand their business. So our job is to help them expand their business through all the channels that we have.
Yeah. But then how did you get this job? Just was it a job ad? You applied on LinkedIn, or did they call you? Or what was the process behind it? How does someone become managing director for Amazon Ads international expansion in this region?
Yeah, I think you have to have some emerging market experience. You have to have built something. I remember the interview process was a really, really tough interview process. I think I had like 8 of them.
Oh, wow.
With some of the sharpest minds in the industry and in retail as well. I mean, they approached me because of my role at Google and because I had multiple conversations with them prior to that. I was leading the IAB at the time, which is the advertising bureau of the region. I just went through the interview process, and I had a clear vision of where it could go. And I just built that vision during the interview process. And I was like, this is what I believe we should do. And I don't think they were, anyone who wants to hire a managing director wants to hire them because of what skill set they have. They want to hire them for what risks are they going to take. And, how can they assess what is, you can go that far and come back, and where is you just have to keep driving.
Yeah.
And I think that's mostly what I was tested on, if you want. 3 years later,
here you are.
Here I am.
And so when you started, how big was your organization compared to where you are today?
I think from a numbers from a people's perspective, I think MENA was kind of developed. Then the Nordics and the Benelux businesses grew in terms of number of people dramatically in the past 2 years, and also we've established the Southeast Asia business in Singapore.
You established that? It wasn't there when you started?
No, I wasn't there.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's kind of my role, right? Is find a product market fit and roll it out.
And that's actually my next question. So what is your role now?
So my role is to manage these markets that are existing, but also look out for any potential new markets that we should establish ads in, right? Typically, we used to follow stores. So wherever there's an Amazon store, we'd start, but that has changed now with time because we have different products with different kind of reach and appeal to people.
And for someone to understand, now I'm sitting here in front of a top executive, right? You're work for this big company. What does a normal day look like for you?
Problem solving. A lot of problem solving.
Yeah.
A lot of guidance for people to keep their eye on the ball. Especially when there's a lot of distraction or when there's crisis like the one we have now.
Yes.
It's also reminding people that it's a responsibility to work for a big company because you represent everybody is the face of the company at some point, no matter how junior or senior you are. And I think I think, some people, I'm not talking about Amazonians here, but in general, lose sight of that. And maybe the most important thing is to remind people to have fun on the job.
Yeah.
I think that's a big one that we always miss out on, and really create a cohesive team. I think as a leader, maybe the one thing that I would differ with a lot of people on is, as a leader, you have to create a positive cult where people are loyal to you because they know that you're loyal to them, before we even address the layer of the company itself. And I think that's super controversial for a lot of companies that I worked with. But if I'm to be genuine and authentic, I want to build rapport with my team. That's very much. If I agree with every decision that the company makes, I'm gonna look so inauthentic, and people are not gonna believe me. And they're not gonna believe I have their best interest in mind, and they won't come to me for guidance. That's, I think, more dangerous to the company than if I was, okay, no, this is what we're going to do because we decided it.
Yeah, but I like the idea of you saying that this is controversial, because this is also a cultural thing, right? Because in Denmark, that's not controversial at all, right? But I understand that in the Middle East and this part of the world, it's much more hierarchical, and the task before the team, right? Whereas in Denmark and the Nordic culture is much more, we have to build rapport, we have to be, we have to everybody sit around the fire and like each other before we get to work. Of course, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but whereas I experience here, it's much more command and do, right?
Yeah, and I don't think it's necessarily bad. I agree partially, and I'll tell you why. When it's not always inauthentic, because sometimes we talk about something in the tech business, in the tech industries, called the Kool-Aid, which is a lot of people drink the Kool-Aid of the companies.
Yeah.
So they start just almost leaders parroting what the company says.
Yes.
And I think that's really dangerous, because you lose a bit of who you are, which you were hired for. You were hired because you were slightly different than the rest, and you can bring a different angle into it.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily because the company is forcing you to make those decisions, but a lot of people feel like, okay, that's the safest option, is for me to just repeat what's being said to me.
Yes.
So it's very personal. It's not just cultural, because I think the Middle East is very much a relationship market, as an example, and you want that rapport. And most of the deals start with, I know you, you know me, we trust each other. What can we do together? Rather than, here, let me sell you something.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of balance there.
Yeah.
That's unspoken.
So just maybe the last topic also, you talked about, your job now as the leader is problem consulting, and also making sure that people are positive and so on, right? And right now we're going through a unusual situation in this region.
Yeah, I think the challenge is in most cases the same for everyone. I think maybe the more important thing is, people think that now, in times of crisis, it's important to establish structure. I don't necessarily agree. I've seen people behave that way. I think it's time to establish presence. I think the more you show up, first of all, just show up. That's how easy it is. Show up as a leader. I'm gonna remember you showing up a lot more than what you just did. Right? Take the leadership of the UAE. I'm going to remember from all the scenes that we've seen, the leaders of the UAE walking through Mall of the Emirates, a lot more.
We all saw that.
Than just remembering, a lot more than just what decisions were taken. It just makes you feel like, it's such a gel of leadership and population, if you want. And the same thing applies in the corporate world. I found that, creating a group on WhatsApp with all my team and having open communication and even sharing some of my fears and concerns as a human being just changes the perspective, right? That we're all in this together. And in practice, not in poetic theory.
Yeah. But I think you've shown actually a very important leadership trait throughout this conversation. And this is, showing vulnerability as a leader, right? You also mentioned earlier, you ask questions, you don't understand, you tell your team, I don't know this, teach me.
Yeah.
Right? And this is also what you're doing now, you're also sharing your fear. That shows this, we call it vulnerability-based trust, right? So you create trust with your team because you also show your human side.
That's right. And when they see your concerns, if they're obviously, if you're a person who panics a lot, and it's going to be very hard for you to manage. But if you're grounded in reality and truth, and also, I've been lucky and unlucky to grow up in.
I was just about to say, you grew up in
right. If you grow up in true war zones, not to take away from what's happening right now, but also you have a more level-headed view of of what survival looks like.
Yeah.
Also, it's important to give them guidance on, what to look out for, who to listen to, because there's also a lot of stuff out there that's just,
Yeah.
misguiding. And so I think it's firstly showing up. Secondly is being the wise voice, and being vulnerable at the same time, but also calming everyone down and giving them the reassurances that they need, because in those situations people are worried about themselves and their families. And I think also, maybe the most important concept is when you live in a city like ours, people come from different backgrounds, so their experiences are extremely different from each other. So addressing everyone with one language, very bad idea, right? I think you have to acknowledge that some people have extreme fear, and you have to acknowledge that some people think it's okay, let's all calm down. And I think you have to make them see each other's point of view, otherwise you lose the cohesion of the team.
So what is your main job as a leader in that situation? How do you make sure that, you speak to people in the way that they like to be spoken to?
I think you have to be vocal about the diversity of opinion and reactions that are out there. So the first thing, I did in this is go out and say, I know a lot of you have never experienced this before, and I know it must be really, really scary and worrying for you. We're here for you. And I know for others, you're worried about family back home, or, you always have to find, if you expose almost what vulnerabilities everyone has, and you put them all in front of everybody, it's amazing what level of support you get. It's just,
so it's basically just addressing the feelings, the emotions that people
having the spectrum to be able to understand the variety of emotions, and also addressing them in a way that's sensitive to their privacy and honest. I think that's probably
and that's, from my experience, what I believe is one of the most strongest leadership skills, that you understand the people and understand how to communicate to each of them in their way and not in your way, because we have a tendency to just say things in the way that we like to say things,
right?
And that's, the receiver doesn't understand it in the same way.
Yeah, that might work when things are fine. In crisis, that won't work. And also opening a door for them to reach out in private if they don't feel comfortable talking in public. That's probably also a third one.
Right. So just quickly, what do you consider great leadership?
I think authenticity is probably the biggest one. And here I'm talking about staying true to who you are, even if sometimes you're not fully aligned to how the company or the corporate environment functions. Allowing experiments, allowing a lot of mistakes, but in a structured way. So it's not just about foolishly taking risks. It's about understanding what's a two-way and what's a one-way risk. I think, seeing it from people's perspective first, and then adjusting your perspective to that, while maintaining the eye on the ball, is probably a big one. But also, for me, showing up. Showing up is the number one trait.
Back to that.
Showing up and authenticity. These are, and in today's world, it's so easy to be unoriginal. So easy. Like I can't anymore look at LinkedIn posts saying, "Oh, life is about not this but that." Like, where this is coming from. Like I feel, just don't lose your voice. Like I'm sure every leader has a lot of personal perspective. Just share that. We can all put it in ChatGPT and change the wording.
Yeah. All right. Very good. I think I actually have so many more questions, because I think your journey is very interesting and your lessons learned and so on. But I think you also have to be respectful of time and your time. Maybe just if you have one last, if there's anything that we haven't touched upon on leadership that you think this is just the final message I want to get out there. Is there anything that you feel is missing that you just want to say on leadership?
Yeah, I think probably the most important thing is, as a leader, you have to be the CEO of your own life, and you have to take care of yourself in ways that are maybe a bit unusual, because you have to be able to handle the burden of everybody coming to you. So if you don't have that peace of mind, if you don't have that space, if your cup is completely empty, that's going to reflect on everyone. So I think one of the biggest things that leaders try to portray themselves as unbeatable. We're all breakable, right? That's the nature of us being human. So you have to know, where are you breakable and how do you take care of that, and how do you nurse it to the extent that you can lead. Otherwise, you're doing a disservice for everyone, starting with the people you're leading and yourself. I think that's often not talked about.
Mm.
And I'm talking about things that are so basic, like what's your diet, how do you exercise, like almost everything,
Yeah, but
the aspect of your life.
yeah, but I totally agree with that. That is so important to to take care of yourself first before you take care of others. And the most practical example we see of that all the time is, of course, in the airplane. They always tell you put the mask on yourself first before others.
Assisting others,
Right?
100%.
And that's the same with leadership from what you're saying here.
Yeah, for sure.
Very good. Rayan, thank you so much for your time. And at the end of each episode, I always ask my guests if there is an amazing leader out here in Dubai that you think would be amazing to hear their story on this podcast. Is there anyone or more people that you can think of?
Yeah, I mean, I can think of two.
Yeah.
Maybe. There's someone I worked with at Google called Anna Germanos, who moved to Meta at some point. She has a fascinating story, and honestly, she's such an inspirational person and speaker. And the other one is Hussein Freji, who's the MD of Snap. Also has recently taken on a big APAC role from Mina. So also he had him and I have a lot of common threads. If you want. But yeah.
Or maybe you can make the introductions to the two of them. Right. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this conversation. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.